prophet Ezekiel speaks in images. It's his form of parables. It has been said that a parable is an earthly story with a heavenly meaning. In Greek, the double root of paravole, parable, is that of laid alongside. And so we have this, as it were, allegory of life, which then can be brought into another reading. The cedar is a tree of great height and nobility. Alas, the treachery of the king Zedekiah against Babylon had led to Babylon taking both king and kingdom into captivity in Babylon. And here we have an exile, but Ezekiel becomes the prophet of the exiled people, and he can foresee new growth. Sometimes the Lord allows misfortune, even a terrible one. It might be even a prison sentence, so as to be able to meet a person there where he is in his brokenness. Might also be the case of someone who needs perhaps to be broken spiritually, to have no attachment at all, even to another person, that person may finally seek only Jesus, and find in him the consolation for which his soul is made. With regard to the psalm, it takes up this notion of the palm tree growing, Lebanon cedar. It's triumphant, and there is growth in the service of the Lord. How beautiful it is to grow, to enter early a monastery, and to grow in the house of the Lord, and to take root in the worship of the Lord and in what pertains to him. We note that our own mystic Julian of Norwich was given to understand that there is a special recompense for those who give their youth to the Lord. It is to be encouraged that a person goes early on to the service of the Lord, rather than after many detours, and with acquired baggage, therefore. Just the other day we had the ordination of a young man of 25 through the hands of our dear friend Bishop Nolte. It's great when a person has all those years ahead of celebrating the sacred mysteries every day until death, a long innings in the service of the Lord. And indeed it's captured in the words of the old Mass, Introibo ad altare Dei, ad Deum qui laetificat juventutem meam. I will go to the altar of my God, the God who gives joy to my youth. Words which have been uttered by generations of priests, remembering each time their first Mass. We should never lose that freshness. And then when it comes to the judgment, how different it is when there has been a whole life orientated. It is true that great recuperation can happen, even at the 11th hour, but still there is a blessedness in that serene, linear movement, growing like the tree. Why should we always have to make detours to get from A to B? Augustine points out how idiotic it is for a person who is trying to go from one point to another to waste time and energy all the time in going round and admiring too much what is distracting him from keeping to the straight course. Cursus rectus ad Deum is the religious life, the straight course, the direct course. If feel like the shortcut, because things are pruned and channeled, and wastage and leakage is cast aside. And so it is that Paul looks to the Bema tu Christou, the tribunal, the judgment seat of Christ. And the bottom line is that we all have to face it. And it is there that judgment is made, not by men. Indeed, often, the more glory one has in this world, the more danger there is of not having a favourable judgment in the other. Why? Well, as the Lord points out, you have had your reward. And if what should be his is absorbed by the person himself, perhaps in the service of the Lord, there's something wrong. It is not at all politically correct to mention this, but we do know that when a person is celebrated hugely on this side, the truth might not be the same on the other. One can think of the various dictators of human history: Nero, Hitler, Lenin, Stalin. Much glory here is very risky. But also in the religious sphere, it's not automatic either. And the more one has in the form of interior awareness and knowledge, the more the responsibility is there. And so it is actually quite sobering when one sees how massively certain people are hugely celebrated, but one asks actually whether the case is completely balanced, because God is not influenced by human judgment. We have the case of Sister Maria Serafina Micheli, whose dates are 1849 to 1911. She was beatified in the Benevento area not that long ago, and she was the foundress of the Sisters of the Angels. So it was Pope Benedict himself who beatified her on the 28th of May 2011, 100 years after her death. She one day was going to Eisleben in Saxony. It happened to be the 4th anniversary of the birth of Martin Luther, the 10th of November 1483. She was looking for a church in which to make a moment of adoration of her Jesus. So she did find one, but alas, it was closed. What could she do? She wanted just to be with Jesus, to visit him, and even the closed door would not stop her. So she knelt down there where she was, on the steps themselves, outside. She was always close to the angels and in constant communication with them. And while she was praying, an angel appeared. Arise, because it is a Protestant church. But I want you to see where Martin Luther was condemned and the pain he suffered as a punishment for his pride. Now she did not realize the reason for the concourse of people there in this town that day was because they were celebrating his birth. And even the Kaiser was coming. It was a massive event. And so in this context, human glory was shown to be, to her, what it was. And through her, we are reminded that we need to be warned. And our funerals must not be our placing of ourselves in the judgment seat of Christ. And what did she see? Well, precisely the punishment of pride. And she's given to understand that the pain he suffered was a punishment for his pride. Now, I studied Luther's writings in France a bit, and they are interesting because they start very well. Beautiful passage about Our Lady here and there, and then what enters in? An independence of mind, a mindset which is self-sufficient. A following then leads to a certain hardening of that position and a self-sufficiency again before the legitimate teaching authority. And she is shown this, a terrible abyss of fire. She sees at the bottom of the hole Luther, and he differed from others. He was surrounded by demons who forced him to kneel. So here we have what's going on. And they were all armed with hammers. They tried in vain to shove a big nail into the head. Now obviously what's going on is that the head is the area which has caused so much damage in Europe and in the church forever. And it's the head that also had the possibility of adjusting things, given the great knowledge and competence of this man. Beautiful translation of the Bible came from his hands and influenced the German language forevermore. Of course, Pope Benedict did not make any allusion to this, but when beatifying her, he insisted on the importance of the mystique of the angels, given the specificity of this good holy nun's mystic life. And he simply says, always be angels of light and love, to lead souls to God on the wings of the word and example. That gentle attitude of Luther, Benedict, contrasts to the raucous voice of Luther. But having said that, the descendants of Luther have things also to teach us. It's interesting that we know that one of the closest friends of Pope Benedict over the years, from early on, was a Lutheran bishop, and he loved to entertain him and have heart-to-heart talks with him. And that could happen. There's no pride entering in. But the inkling is given as regards responsibility when we have things like this coming out of Luther. He is known to have said to his mother, who wanted to know whether she ought to follow him in his movement, "No, stay a Catholic, because I do not want to deceive nor betray my mother." So, these things make us reflect. And when there is a knowledge, then there is a responsibility. That's why to enter the priesthood or the monastic life and then to tamper with grace is not a good place to be with regard to going into the beyond afterwards. We know of this lady who, in the heart of the Protestant Reformation in England, went on foot to find the answer because she knew there was an erudite man of God at one of the great universities. She found him and got him there before her eyes and cornered him and explained how far she'd come and how confused she was and wanted to know what was the truth. And she said to him, "Reverend Father, I would ask you upon your soul to tell me in what church I must live." And he did not dismiss her, but said, "Good lady, because you ask me upon my soul, I will tell you. The church in which you live must be the church of the state, because of the many inconveniences that any other alternative would pose. But the church in which you die must be the Church of Rome." With that he went away. Not long afterwards he was going to Lambeth Palace to be entertained by the Archbishop of the new church. He felt a terrible pain as he went through the corridor, cried, dropped to the ground, dead. So these parables can also be found on a daily basis, because life is full of stories, and truth is better than fabricated fiction. We can use these. We can use them to teach each other. Pick up, like a magpie, gems of truth from moments of history, past and present, and let these be the parables that remain. For the visual imprints itself forevermore.